Hello everyone, welcome to the Office of Online Learning video on weekly content. Today we're going to talk about the key components of the weekly content. So what should we look at? What should we expect when we go into our weekly content? And we want to provide some general guidelines for you to support the principles of universal design for learning and provide an example and really focusing on those key components to help when tackling and building your weekly content for your course. So the three main key components that we're going to focus on today is providing expectations for the week. So when you have this learning module, really again being very explicit for our students as to what your expectations are and what they should expect for the content for the week. I know for me, I really focus on providing the learning goals. So what should they learn? Really connecting it to the bigger picture, right? That essential learning as to why is this important for me in my field and my course in my life? And also I like to use the term steps for completion. So kind of giving them almost a to-do list on what they need to get accomplished. So really packing that into my expectations for the week. And then providing the content. So really focusing on, are there multiple opportunities for students to engage with the content? Are we varying how we're providing this content and giving some opportunities for them to learn in different ways and really reinforcing universal design for learning? And finally, some way of measuring their learning, whether it's through an assignment, a discussion board. So I'll provide an example of how I've done this and how I'm using it in this particular class. But again, going back to universal design, really trying to think flexibly. Can we give our students options when demonstrating their learning? Can they make a choice? Can they express themselves in different ways? And through that choice, we can increase their student engagement, but being flexible to allow students to type something or maybe record audio really helps with that expression as well when we're thinking of universal design for learning. And so the expectations, as I said, really thinking about listing out our learning goals for this particular course and outlining why is it essential. Not only is this helpful for the students, but I find it's really helpful for me. I sometimes, again, when I'm thinking about my on-the-ground class, I sometimes get really excited about, oh, we did this activity, I did this small group. And in an online environment, that can become very overwhelming. And so I find writing out my learning goals for a unit or a week helps keep my activities grounded. It really helps me to focus on what is the essential learning and how do my activities and my measurements align to that. So I don't feel like I'm assigning too much work where I'm grading things above and beyond, and my students don't feel like they're being provided busy work. Things to do. That organizational support is so helpful for our students. As I mentioned previously, I use steps for completion in my classes. But again, when we look at universal design for learning, it really helps with that multiple means of engagement and helping our students have a path, helping with their executive functioning to give them a path for completion as to what they should expect within our weekly content. And now we move on to the content. So really thinking about how are we presenting the information. I know I really try and make sure that I'm varying my content. So I often like to use text to provide examples. I share my anecdotes. I share my experiences with my students, and then I will often embed a video. It might be something created by another professional organization. It might be a video created by me. I will often always try and share podcasts as well, and I use visual representations. And so I really try and consider as I'm creating each of my weekly content, am I varying the types of resources that I'm sharing for my students? And that's something that's also really important when we think about universal design. I will also then provide some supplementary activities. So interested in learning more, I'll provide some other options for students. And really thinking about, can they engage with this material in different ways, and how can we then promote their access to this content? And finally, the final component is measuring student learning. So there are lots of different options for measuring student learning and thinking about, again, can we provide multiple means of expression? I know initially when I first started in online, I really focused a lot on discussion boards, and discussion boards are very writing and reading heavy. And for some students who might struggle with that means, it can be really daunting for them. And so really thinking about, can I be more creative? And so often when I have my students demonstrate their learning, I ask for their notes from the session. And I really emphasize that it can be flexible. They can draw a picture, they can handwrite, they can type, they can submit an audio file. So I allow for that student choice, again, for that multiple means of expression. And I tell them, if you prefer to handwrite, you can handwrite it on a document and take a picture of it and upload it to Blackboard. I find that some students will handwrite their notes and then retype them. I'm like, no, you don't have to do that. But really thinking about, can we vary the way that they are demonstrating their learning? And most importantly, we want to make sure that we're matching the task to the learning. So if we're asking students to be able to, identify the characteristics of a particular learner, we want to then make sure our measurement of the student learning has them identifying those characteristics. And again, this is something that I've really caught myself quite a few times saying like, oh, well, my learning goal was identify, but I'm not really measuring that anywhere in my student learning. And I've really found myself lowering or decluttering my activities to make sure that they're in very strong alignment and focusing on that essential learning, which is so helpful for me and for my students. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go onto Blackboard, and I'm going to share some examples and how to create your content in your weekly folder. Here I am in my course shell. So I'm under weekly materials and I have my week 1 folder. So I'm going to click in the folder here and you can see it's blank. I want to make sure my edit mode is on in the top right corner. And now I can see that I can edit my content. So I'm going to go under build content, choose item. Now I'm going to type in my learning goals here. And I have my learning goals copied onto my clipboard. So I'm going to paste them in. And one of the things that I find really helpful when copying and pasting text from Microsoft Word is I will select it all and I'll hit this clear formatting button. That just takes away any of the embedded code or formatting behind the text that might make Blackboard look a little weird if you've ever done that. So I'm just going to change the font here to make it a little bit larger. The other thing that's very important is making sure that you add headings. This is important not only to help that visual distinction for our students, but if any of our students are using screen readers, that allows for them to skip through sections. So it really provides that embedded formatting so that students can skip through. So I'm going to add the heading there, and that just makes it cleaner and make sure that all of the screen readers can then read it as needed. And then I'm going to click submit. Now I want to add my weekly content. So I'm going to go again, build content, add an item. I'm going to go weekly content. I have it on my clipboard again, so I'm going to paste it in there. Okay, so same thing here. I want to then make sure that my first step is a heading. So I'm going to go back and format it as a heading. In this activity, I'm asking my students to, when they see an emoji, so I'm going to insert an emoji. There we go. For when they see an emoji, to take notes. So I'm giving them the option here to type, draw, handwrite, for really thinking about multiple means of expression. And so I'm keeping that there. The next thing that I want is I want to hyperlink this word high leverage practices. So I'm going to highlight the link and I'm going to cut it, delete that note. So I'm going to highlight the text that I want hyperlinked and I'm going to click the hyperlink button. And then I'm going to paste that back in there. And I'm going to open it into a new window because that is so that our students don't get moved to another website and then have to hit the back button to go back to their content. It just opens a new window for them. I'm going to type in high leverage practices and then click insert. And so now that's a hyperlink, which is easier again for my students to access. So I'm going to come here. I have make sure that this top part is a heading. And I'm going to come down and make this a heading. So now I want my students to watch a video. So I have the YouTube link right here. So I'm going to cut it again. And what I want to do is I want to embed this video right here. So my students don't have to go into another website. So I'm going to click the insert or embed media. And I'm going to paste the website in. And then I know it's working because then the little box comes up and I click insert. So once the box appears there, that's how I know that it is then working. And then I click submit. Now you can see my video here, and once I click play, my students can watch the video right embedded within my course. My final step is adding in my measuring student learning. So for this particular activity, as you can see in my steps for completion, I want my students to take notes and submit them. So what I'm going to do is I have under assessments, I'm going to go to assignment. And I'm going to say week 1, submit notes here. And I can just add submit notes from week 1. Note taking. And usually I'll provide some examples like my students here used the emoji. I'll assign a due date, which will be very important for my students when I see the calendar. Just assign a due date there. I'll assign a point value. I don't have a rubric here. What I also find really helpful, depending on what you need and what your approach is, but under submission details, by default, Blackboard always has a single attempt. And for something like notes, a student might by accident hit submit and not include all of the pages, or I'll allow a student to revise. So I will generally allow for unlimited attempts, just so that I don't have to go back in and allow it on a per student basis. I'll add that just generally within my assignment. And then I click submit. So now I have my expectations, I have my weekly content for my students, and finally, I have their assignment. So I've measured their student learning. And that's the general framework for your 3 major components of your weekly content in your online class.